I have a stalker.
Hello, I am 15 and male. I live in a small rural town in South Washington State. For descriptive reasons, I will describe the town. On the northwest side, where I live, it is close to Forstead area, and the center east-south end of the town is very flat, not many trees. The best way to describe it is wheat land. One day this kid showed up at my house claiming that I told him to come over. He even knew my name. We will call this kid James. James was about 14 and always dressed in a hoodie. James would always come to my house and he would ask to come inside. I always refused to let him inside my parents' home. I had told James that I never wanted to talk to him. Please don't judge me. Something in my gut always told me to get rid of him as soon as possible. James did not take this well and stormed out of my backyard. Every day after that, I would see him at the nearest street corner from my home, just staring. I never told my parents as I felt that they would not help. One day, about 4 or 5 months after telling James that I never wanted to see him again, I was walking to the local market. As I am halfway to the market, I spot James walking towards me. To avoid him, I cross the street to the other side. He follows and crosses the street. I see the market just ahead and cross the last street to reach the market and jog inside the right entrance. The layout of the market is that the market is back from the street about a half a block. The area in front of the market is the parking lot with 2 rows of parking, and to the side is a small parking lot. If you were to look at it from the street, there's 2 entrances, one on the left and one on the right. The deli is on the right. I order my food, pay, and leave from the left entrance to avoid James. As I leave, James is outside and spots me leaving, and immediately follows, but in a light jog. I cross the street on the street over from the first street, adding an extra block to my journey. I have an advantage of about a block and start jogging. Once I see my house, I get my key out and get inside as fast as I can. James starts banging on the doors and windows and yelling things like, "Open up," and "You're going to regret it." A nearby neighbor saw the commotion and soon tackled James. I will forever be grateful. James wasn't charged with anything, as the police here don't do anything. Just today, about a month after the incident, I was home alone and I hear someone trying to open the screen door in the backyard. I drop to the floor and slowly peek around the corner and see James trying to open the door. I call my neighbor and tell him that James is trying to get in. I see my neighbor storm out of his house and starts chewing him out. I decide not to call the police as they are not going to do anything. I sit in my home typing this with the lights off. I don't know what to do. If anything else comes from this, I will update.
Shower intruder.
Okay, let's start this off with some background information. I'm a young female, 5'6", about 130 pounds. Someone could probably snatch me up pretty easily. I live in a condo and there are lots of houses around and are attached to mine, so people could probably see if someone were to break in. My bedroom and bathroom are both on the first floor, and at night I usually keep my porch lights on to show that I'm home, since I don't live in the best neighborhood. It's not the ghetto, but houses get robbed often. I just came home from work. I work the afternoon shift, so I get off around 10:30, and I'm usually home by 11. You can imagine after working 8 hours straight, I might want to take a shower. I generally take really long showers, and I don't worry about staying up late since I rarely have to wake up early. I'd been in the shower for about 20 minutes when I hear a large thump. I assumed it was just my dog. He's a bit of a troublemaker and is always knocking things over, so I thought nothing of it and continued to shower. I continued to hear what I thought was my dog running around. After being cooped up for almost 9 hours, he was itching to get outside. I ended my shower after about 45 minutes. I put my hair up in a towel and wrapped one around myself as well. Stepping out of the shower, I was shivering and warm PJs was the only thing on my mind. I exited the bathroom into an even colder hallway leading to my bedroom. But before I could take more than a step, I noticed a muddy footprint on my carpet. Now, my carpets are bright white and brown dirt was definitely noticeable. I was just in shock. I always take my shoes off at the front door, and these were much bigger than my feet. I looked down the hallway to see more footprints. Every foot or so there was a muddy boot print. I continued down the hall with a hairbrush. Yes, I know I used a hairbrush as a weapon, but at least I had something. The footprints continued all the way down to my front door, but what I saw when I got there freaked me out even more. My door was halfway open. I always lock my door. I am an extremely paranoid person and I take a lot of precautions when it comes to safety, especially as a female. I looked at my door a little closer and I realized that my lock had been broken. The thump I heard in the shower was the person kicking my lock. I called a lot of my neighbors to ask if they saw anything, but no one did. But one of my neighbors did say that there had been some recent robberies. But the thing is, I'm assuming he was male by the foot size, didn't take anything. He just walked up to the bathroom door and turned around and left. Who knows how long he was standing there, possibly waiting for me to come out and to do who knows what. I called and asked one of my male neighbors to come look around for any signs if he was there. He looked for about a half an hour. He didn't find the guy, but he found that the lock on my windows was bent. I can't say for sure if he did this, but I never opened my window. We called the police, but since we didn't know what he looked like or anything about him, there was really nothing they could do. They just kept a closer watch on the area. Since then, I have gotten my door and window repaired. I also got new locks, just in case. The whole thing still really creeps me out, though. What scares me the most was how close he was to me, and I didn't even know. He could have easily killed or raped me, and I wouldn't have seen it coming. The only thing I don't get is why my dog didn't bark like crazy. He didn't bark at all. He didn't do anything, actually. I hope if he comes back, Brutus will rip his face off. So, creepy guy who broke into my house, let's not meet.
Midnight camping thrills.
I am a 26-year-old male. I had been planning a camping trip with my wife and dad for a whole year. I wanted everything to be perfect. as we don't get away from the town and dive deep into the woods as much as I'd like. This takes place in a very tree-dense Davy Crockett National Forest in East Texas. Earlier that day, my dad decided to go a little early and pick out a good spot for us to camp. To give a layout of where we camped, there were 2 dirt roads on either side of us and an overlook to the north of us. We camped in the middle, between the 2 roads. My wife and I had met my dad there around 11 a.m. We set up camp and proceeded to enjoy the day until around dinner time, when we started to cook our meal for the evening. Right as we got done with dinner, we could see this truck circling around our campsite. He went around us several times and finally pulled right up into our camp and got out of his truck. He then proceeded to tell us that this was his family's campsite and how the firewood that was laying around was his. Now, in this particular forest, campsites are first come, first serve, and my dad had been there since 9 a.m. He then asked if he could camp next to us, and of course, being friendly, we said yes. We didn't know that when he said next to us, he meant directly on top of us. He backed his camper in so close to our tents and vehicles that he blocked my truck in. We weren't sure why he was doing this, being that there were so many other campsites available, but we just shrugged it off and tried to have a good time anyway. Not too long after that, we noticed a white Dodge dually circling around us. We had an off feeling from this truck because it went around several times, but we dismissed it because the area we were at was popular due to the overlook. After a long night of drinking and goofing off, we decided to go to bed. I was in a dead sleep when out of the woods, I wake up to a blood-curdling scream. I jolt up and ask my wife, "What the fuck was that?" About 30 seconds later, we hear another scream off in the distance. At this point, I grab my gun and unzip the tent so we could see out. My dad had left a lantern burning so we could see a little ways into our campsite. At that moment, we see the white Dodge dually tearing down the road behind us. They continued down the road until they were out of sight. We heard them stop and get out of their truck, slamming the doors and screaming. They then proceeded to get back in their truck and drive very slowly down the other road that was in front of our campsite. At this point, we were terrified, thinking they were coming to rob us, but they kept driving until they were out of sight. Then we heard them shooting. After the gunshots ended, they sped off. At this point, we thought that maybe they were just drunk and acting stupid, so we didn't call the cops, and we didn't have signal anyway. We just tried to go back to sleep. The next day, we had to make a beer run for my dad. When we made it out of the camping area and hit the main highway, there were police everywhere. They had stopped 2 young boys. We assumed they were the ones who were being troublemakers the night before and continued on into town. When we got back to our campsite, the cops were leaving after talking to my dad. They told my dad that the guys in the white dually had gone into the young guys' camp while they were hunting and were robbing them. The boys walked up on their camp being robbed, and the dually guys pulled guns out on the boys, proceeding to rob the young boys at gunpoint. We think that if it hadn't have been for the people that camped right on top of us, as strange as it was, they would have robbed us instead. They made our campsite look bigger than it actually was. The people in the white dually were never caught. So, people in the white Dodge dually, let's not meet, because you might end up with a bullet
Everything's fine.
Okay, so this happened maybe a year ago now, and it happened to kind of my entire family. I was 20 at the time, my sister's 17. So one night we were all asleep, and my sister was on some serious medication because she had trouble sleeping, because she had night terrors. It was storming out, and it doesn't usually here, so I was up with all the noises and thunder pacing my room. My home is 2 stories, and my sister got the only room on the first floor because she wanted the bigger room with the French doors. There's 2 sets, one in her room and one in the living room, that led to the back. Anyways, so it's storming and the wind is really strong and I'm already on edge. All of a sudden, there's a big thump from downstairs, like someone threw open the back doors and the house alarm starts screaming. So my first reaction is to, of course, jump in my bed. And right as I do, I hear my dad, a former Marine, jump out of bed, grab the pistol he and my mom keep under the mattress, heard my mother ask what's wrong, and hear him throw open his door. Let me explain the layout really quick. When you come up the staircase of my house, there's the bathroom right across from there, and the small hallway goes into sort of an L from there. At the beginning of the L is the bathroom. The corner is my brother's room, then my room, and at the top of the L is my parents' room. He started in my room. In his t-shirt and boxers, he military raid style kicks in my door, clears the room, tosses me the extra 9mm he keeps in his closet, and says to follow him. So he kicks open my brother's room and the bathroom and clears those rooms, takes the stairs at least 3 at a time down to the first floor, and whistles so I know I can come down. At this point now, everything my dad's prepared us for safety-wise is kicking in with adrenaline, and it's hilarious to think about this part because I'm in an oversized t-shirt and panties. My dad in his t-shirt and backers with socks on, and the clearing of the house all happened within 2.5 minutes, I'd say. So he kicks open my sister's room, where we see the back doors of her room are wide open and the rain is pouring in. She very groggily sits up and asks if her soup is ready. My dad stays with her and I clear the kitchen and the living room, which is one open space, and the living room windows are bay style and face my backyard, and disarm the alarm when I hear my dad shouting, his pistol fire, and a voice that is very much not his say, "Shit." And then I see a tall flash of dark run across the backyard and throw itself over the back fence. I immediately call the police and they're there within minutes. Apparently, when I left the room to clear the living room, my dad walked from the door to the foot of my sister's bed. She has a big wood frame that you can't really see the other side unless you're standing where he was. And at that point, my dad saw the man lying flat on the floor of my sister's room, trying not to be seen by us. He left behind a big knife, like a kitchen knife type thing, and a rolled up string of rope. They never found the guy who broke in, and we reinforced the back doors and changed the locks since they were from the original owner when we moved in, which we should have done in the first place. It was very scary, but now when we look back, we laugh because my sister was so out of it. The guy ran off and my dad had ran after him across the yard, and by the time I got to my sister's room to check on her, she just looked at me, obviously still not awake, said everything's fine, and tried to go back to sleep.
crazy neighbor.
A little backstory. I'm a 16-year-old boy, but when this happened, I was 13, 14. So it was June, and I wake up to someone knocking on the front door. Confused, I get up and go see who is knocking. I open the door, and a man in his late 50s, early 60s is standing there with his wife and twin daughters who were 10. I call for my mom and go back to my room. Later, my mom tells me that they are the new neighbors. I don't really care. So life goes on with them as our new neighbors, and I decide that the man, we will call Jeff, has been really passive-aggressive with me. This I don't care much about. So a month passes and my birthday is in 3 days. I'm excited and I get to have my best friends over. Back then, my friends and I were really into playing in the woods. There is a small patch of woods next to my house, and I decide I would clear out a spot so we can play. We knew the owner of the land, and he said it was okay to play there. While I'm picking up some sticks, I hear someone yelling. I notice Jeff at his front door yelling at me. He yells, "Get the fuck off my property." I live on a cul-de-sac, so I live on one side and he lives on the other, and there is a patch of woods between our houses. I was so confused because he didn't own the land I was on. I decided to ignore him and continue to work. Then he walks over to me and grabs my arm and drags me to my front door. He started yelling at me and my parents. It ended with my parents calling the police. I remember nothing happening, but he kept saying that I was on his property. I never was. Fast forward, and it's now my birthday, and my friends are over. We are in the woods and we play. While we were playing, we hear bushes start to rustle. We point our flashlights towards the bushes, and what we saw still creeps me out. There in the bush was Jeff. Right as we notice him, he runs back to his house, and we do the same. I rush to my parents, who call the police. Nothing happened though, because he didn't do anything. We go to bed, and that was the last thing that happened for the rest of the summer. It's now August and school just started. Now Jeff has twin daughters who were friends with my sister. All three were in the same class and grade. I saw them a lot. At first they seemed like good kids. One Saturday afternoon, I hear the twins playing when I hear the window downstairs break. I come downstairs and the window on the front door is shattered. My mom sees it, and I tell her that it was, we will call my sister Kate and the twins. As I say this, I hear Kate upstairs yelling, "What happened?" I go outside and I see the twins hiding behind one of the bushes in the front yard. I asked them if they broke the window, and they said it was them. I tell them to go home, and I tell my mom. She goes to tell Jeff, and before my mom can finish, he screams at her, saying that his perfect angels wouldn't do that. My mom comes back and goes in her room. I don't know what happened, but we just got the window repaired, and that was that. Over the next 2 weeks, I noticed that things are being moved around in our garage and front yard. I thought it was just my siblings or my parents until I walk in the garage and see the twins moving my brother's bike. I yell at them and they go home crying. Apparently they had been doing it the whole time, and I was pissed. I tell my mom, and she once again calls the police. They say to just lock the door. The next day, I went to my friend's house. And while I was gone, Jeff came over and started yelling at my parents, saying I attacked his twins. I didn't. My parents never told me all of what he said, but apparently he threatened to kill me. Great, so I'm terrified of being home alone because I thought he would kill me. So now it's the day before Christmas Eve, and I'm outside playing on my phone, and the twins come out of nowhere and grab my phone and run. I chase them, but they run in their house, and I knock on the door, and Jeff answers. I tell him that his twins have my phone. I was so scared, but I wanted my phone. He goes and gets it and throws it on the ground, shattering it. I scream at him, and he pushed me down and said to get off his property. I call the police, and he says that I tried to rape his daughters, and I was brought in for questioning, and after a while they let me go because I never tried to rape the girls. I get home and I cry. I was so mad at him and scared. I didn't go outside for the rest of winter break. So let's talk about his last month in my town. It's now May and school busted finished. I was in my room and I hear the twins and Kate playing. Then I hear Kate crying extremely loud. I tell my dad and we go outside to see Kate crying on the ground with a gash in her head and a bloody rock on the ground. My dad goes to help her, and it turns out that the twins hit my sister with a rock. I started yelling at the twins, and Jeff and his wife come out. I tell the wife what happened, and she started freaking out. She had to have said I'm sorry 4 times while trying to get the twins, when Jeff says that Kate probably attacked the twins. And that pissed my dad off so much. My dad punched Jeff, and it knocked him out. My mom calms down my dad, and he takes Kate to the hospital. And I help Jeff in because his wife asked, and she had always been so nice. Once I'm done with that, I go home and the police are called. No one presses charges, and Jeff and his family leave 2 weeks later. So yeah, that's my story about my crazy neighbor. So Jeff and your twins, let's not meet again.
Was walking with my girlfriend when I noticed 2 guys following us.
My girlfriend is Japanese. I'm not Japanese, but being Asian, I look local. We normally speak English together because I'm still learning Japanese and it's not that easy. We were walking downtown in Sapporo one rainy night and I noticed some guys behind us who seemed to be following us pretty close. I don't know what language they spoke as it was too noisy everywhere, but they looked not local. Maybe Asian American, but 100% sure they weren't Japanese. They were wearing shorts and some funny Hawaiian flower shirts while it was raining. No umbrella either. No Japanese dresses like that. So after I turned left twice randomly and noticed that they were still super close behind us, I decided to enter a parking lot with an automatic sliding door. I pushed my girlfriend in and said, "Oh, I need something in here." And she wondered why I wanted to go inside a parking lot, but I kept pushing her. Once inside, there was a security guard and we walked past him, and I stopped to close my umbrella. I turned around and told my girlfriend 2 guys were following us. We looked behind us and noticed the 2 guys stopped in front of the sliding door. They were looking in our direction, and then pretended to look something up on their phone. Then my girlfriend realized their behavior was weird. Then a third guy joined them. They looked briefly at us, but I guess the security guard prevented them from doing whatever they had in mind. Again, they had no umbrella, no raincoat, were wearing shorts, and it was rainy and cold. I pulled out my pocket knife just in case. I know it's illegal in Japan, but I grew up in a shithole and kept still. The guys left after a while. My girlfriend and I think for the first time felt unsafe. Apparently, Japan is super safe in general, and she could barely believe someone would follow us and wait the way they did, acting shady and all. I grew up in a cesspool and spent some time studying in South America, so I don't trust anyone. But after they left, I felt less tense. We went to a restaurant later. My girlfriend told me she was glad I was paranoid.
My pit bull is a hero.
My husband began working overnights a few months ago, so this means my dog and I usually watch TV and sleep the night away before he gets home. Sometimes I'll just draw all night while the dog sleeps at my feet, and when the weather is decent, I'll take her out for a jog, or I'll take her to my friend's house so we don't die of boredom. One night, while drawing some fan art for my favorite band, I decided to put my drawing pad down and go for a walk to get a soda for myself and maybe a pack of peanut butter crackers for the dog. I got the dog ready and made sure my cat wasn't hiding by the door so she wouldn't dart outside, and we soon left after I located the cat snoozing on our couch. I remember this happening around late summer because our town likes to prepare for Halloween 2 months in advance. Pumpkins started to appear everywhere, and my dog liked to try and stop and steal tiny pumpkins from cute displays that local mom and pop stores put up. I can't count how many times I would have to apologize for my dog's rude behavior, but that's not what this story is about. Sorry, I'm rambling and remembering the funny things my dog does. While jogging carelessly and dragging my 70-pound pit bull away from her beloved tiny pumpkin displays, a man across the street started yelling something I couldn't make out at the time. Of course, I turned around and asked him what he had said. We had a short, uneasy conversation that went something like this. Man, yeah, what are you doing out here? It's kind of late. Me, just taking the dog out for a walk. Why? It was 9:30. Man, isn't the old man supposed to do that? Me, wondering if I even knew this asshole. He'll be back from work when I get home. Man, oh really? Does he always let you take the dog out this late? After the man said that, he started moving across the street quickly and wouldn't break eye contact with me. I started backing away like I was ready to run, but my 70-pound blue pit bull mix started growling and snarling. Somehow my dog knew shit was not right at all. The man snapped out of his bullshit and looked down to see my dog flashing her pearly white teeth. My dog lowered her head and stared this idiot in the eyes. The man tried to laugh it off and took one more step forward. This sent my dog into a fucking rage. My dog lunged and barked like she was going to rip his head off. I thank God I had a grip on her leash, otherwise this man would have been doggy kibble. The man finally got the hint and turned back. He said something else I couldn't make out as he left. I don't want to know what he would have done, but I was happy to have my dog with me that night. I just wanted to add that my dog has always been a very friendly dog, and she never has tried to attack anyone before or after this incident. Again, I am just so glad that she was there to save my ass from some idiot that night. So, creepy guy that's overly concerned about women that walk their dogs at night. Let's agree to never meet again, or my dog may take a good bite of your ass next time.
Unexpected backyard visitor.
This is an actual experience that makes me peep out of my kitchen blinds every morning before I turn on the light. Cut to the encounter. It's dawn, so still a little dark, even though the blinds are all open in the kitchen. I flip on the light and start feeding the cats as usual. Through the glare on the window, I think I see someone in my backyard, which wouldn't be unheard of, as an older lady rents the guest house behind me. She has her own fenced area, though. I get closer and lose my breath as a scraggly middle-aged stranger is in a robe in my backyard, staring at me. He's standing perfectly still and doesn't look away, which immediately struck me with a, oh shit, I'm in a horror movie feeling. I stared back for a bit and realized he was looking at the house, not me. I rationalize, thinking maybe he was the older lady's overnight guest and got confused about her living arrangement. Maybe he thinks I'm an intruder. So I step out back and give him a, "Good morning, how you doing?" as I walk up and try to determine his eye line. He answers back normally as if nothing about the situation is weird. Note, he has not made eye contact. He is still staring at my house. I then voice the classic passive-aggressive suburbia threat. "Can I help you? I'm your neighbor. I think my kid's toy is on your roof." Two things. I know my neighbors. He was not familiar. Also, what kid lands a toy on a roof at this hour? I tell him I'll go up and check after work, kind of shooing him out. He doesn't move, just keeps staring. I repeat, "I'll check after work. You can go. Which house are you? I'll leave it at your door. What is it?" He's silent for a moment as I grow more irritated at his lack of response and more creeped out. He finally replies, "Oh, I'm just a couple houses that way." He lackadaisically points in no discernible direction. I say okay and again ask what his kid lost. He speaks again. "Really, I could get it if I could come in and go out that window." He points up at an attic vent. "No, that's not really a window. I promise I'll check later. Have a good day." Again trying to politely shoo him. I've now edged myself over to a loose board from my firewood pile that I could use as a weapon. He continues to stare at the house. His eyes haven't moved yet. I pick up the board and pretend I'm moving it to a table behind him so I can put him between myself and the fence gate, his hopeful exit. As I'm doing that, he breaks the trance and walks towards my back door. I'm pretty much done with the niceties at this point. I run up to block him, board in hand, and deliver the weakest intimidation speech ever. "Look, man, I don't know who you are, but I'm sorry. Maybe I don't remember you. It's early, but I can't let you into my house. Please, I'll look on the roof later." He raises up his hand as if to say, "No, I don't mean any harm. and tries to put it on my shoulder. I sidestep and put a few feet between us. He speaks again in a dazed tone. I'm sorry. Maybe if I could just use your ladder, I can get up there. I get a little more confrontational and raise the board to show it. Not cocked, but visible. Dude, I said I'd look later. Please leave. I have to get ready for work. He turns, saunters, and looks at the house again. Now back to his original spot, in a trance again. Please leave. My yell rolls off him. He isn't even listening. But after a yawn, he does casually make his way back down the side of the house. At this point, I dart back inside and watch him from the windows, cell phone at the ready. He leaves and shuts the gate behind him effortlessly, which, by the way, is hard to do. My friends still haven't mastered the lift and pull gate locking move. I asked around, and no one knew who this guy was based on my description, and no one has seen him since. I would say he was mentally ill, maybe homeless and passing through, but he seemed too clean cut. Scraggly, but not dirty. I still don't know what to make of it. It was just so bizarre how he paid so little mind to trespassing and being told to leave. And no, there was no toy on my roof or in my yard.
Man in red pickup truck.
I just discovered this sub today and have spent the past few hours here, and it makes me want to share a story of my own. I was in middle school, so I was 12 to 14 years old. A girl. I was walking home from school in Brooklyn, New York. This blonde man in a red pickup truck pulls over and calls over to me through the passenger window. I stop walking and stare at him. I do not recall what he said initially, but he had asked me if he can come to my house because he needed to use the bathroom. I said that there's a store and a restaurant up 2 blocks that he can go to, and pointed up at it. He resists and asks again, and I again repeat that the store and restaurant is right there. He then asks me if I can come over to him and help shield him while he pees. Luckily, I was walking on a large sidewalk/street that consisted of a huge apartment condo. He was parked right up to the sidewalk. If he wanted to kidnap me in broad daylight, he would have to walk more than 10 feet to where I was standing. Even to my adolescent mind, that is the most preposterous thing I've ever heard. I look at him and say no. He then gives up and drives away. I remember being shaken and scared and watched his truck fly down the street. Even though I knew he was gone and it probably didn't make much of a difference, I walked down the driveway 1 block away from my actual house to throw him off. Reading the stories here, my dad is right. Humans are definitely scarier than any animal or paranormal shit.
Creepy guy at the gas station.
When I was 20 and attending school, I lived in a college town a couple of hours away from where the rest of my family lived. This resulted in many weekend trips back home, usually with my boyfriend, now husband, who grew up in the same small town as I did. This particular time, my boyfriend had to work over the weekend. but I still wanted to visit for some reason. I packed up my shit and my dog, a Great Pyrenees mixed girl, and headed out. It was early in the morning, maybe 7 or so, on a Saturday, so not many people were at the gas station. This was good, as I wanted to grab breakfast and needed to pump gas, and I've never been one to leave my dog in the car for too long. My dog, Luna, was about a year old at this time and weighed about 100 pounds. A huge baby. She loves snuggles and is a total mama's girl. Anyway, she takes up the entire back row of my tiny Chevy Cavalier and was chilling while I pumped gas and quickly ran inside for some breakfast. I come out a few minutes later, Pop-Tarts and a soda in hand. I notice that an older man has made his way over to my car from a beat-up truck and is watching Luna in the back seat. Having grown up in a small town, I'm used to people making conversation for no reason, so I do the cool-ass head nod as I walk over. He turns to me and starts making conversation, asking about Luna. Is that an Irish wolfhound? I obviously look confused. I'm a huge animal lover and foster and volunteer for the Humane Society. Luna looks nothing like an Irish wolfhound. Nope, I told him. Great Pyrenees. I stand facing him, my arms crossed and watching Luna in the back seat. Pretty dog, pretty owner. He gives this huge, creepy grin and moves closer to me. Not threatening really, but just invading my personal space. I try to smile and thank him. I really need to be going. Wait, can I pet your dog? I thought it was such an odd request that I found myself lying. No, sorry, she doesn't like strangers. I should go. I go to get into the driver's seat of the car when suddenly Luna starts going ballistic. I turn and hear the click of the door opening, and I realize that I accidentally left the back door unlocked. The guy is going to pet my dog whether I told him he could or not, apparently. Luna is absolutely freaking out, foaming at the mouth, snarling and barking. She lunges for his hand, and the guy takes his hand back quickly. I jump out of my car and shove myself in between him and my dog, going into protective mama bear over my 100-pound fluff ball. You need to get the fuck away. I tell him loudly enough just in case anyone else in the parking lot can hear. He doesn't listen and starts yammering on and on about how he just wants to pet the dog and will not leave. So I let Lou out of the car. My normally sweet dog turned into an absolute hellhound, snapping at the guy and growling and barking. Finally, he backed off, and I hurriedly got Luna into the car and locked the doors, peeling out of the parking lot. I have no idea what he wanted with petting my dog or why he would open my car door without permission. All I know is that he yelled something about seeing me later as I left, and I have never felt so weirded out by a stranger in my life. Needless to say, I was glad I brought Luna along, and she was treated to a cheeseburger at our lunch stop. I haven't traveled without her since. So, creepy guy at the gas station who wanted to pet my dog. Consider yourself lucky you didn't get your arm ripped off. And let's not meet ever again.
Only in Canada.
This story comes from my father, born near Toronto, who grew up on a farm with a younger brother and an older sister. So this happened in 1969, while my dad was 8 or 9. One night, Both parents were out of the house, along with his brother. This left him and his sister at home alone. Eventually, the phone rings, and my father picks it up with standard Canadian politeness. "Hello, this is Bob." The person calling said that they were coming to kill both my father and his sister, and told them to leave the house. My father, slightly spooked, uses the intercom system to page his sister, telling her what happened. At that time, both children could drive, as they had been doing so on the farm, so leaving the house wasn't too much of a problem. While packing some things to leave, the phone rings again, and my father answers it. "Hello, this is Bob." The voice says, "Why haven't you left yet? I'm coming to kill you." In which my father replies, in a stereotypical Canadian accent, "Well, I'm trying to leave, but you keep on fucking calling. I can't leave when I have to keep answering the phone now, can I?" The voice hangs up, and my father and his sister drive to where their parents were having dinner. Nothing else happened with the voice. It was probably just a prank of some sort, and it didn't really faze my dad, but I thought you guys would enjoy this tale from Canada.
Maybe about to be kidnapped as a newborn baby.
This is a story that I was told by my mother when I was old enough to understand what had almost happened. I was only a few weeks old, and in those days, when a mother had given birth and taken their baby home, midwives were sent from the hospital to check on the baby and the mother once or twice a week at max. My dad was working, so he wasn't home, and my mother had put me to sleep and was just going about her business in the house. These visits were only every week or so, and she had just had 2 midwives come the morning one day before, so she knew immediately what happened next wasn't okay. She heard a knock at the door, and so went to open the door. We lived in a close-knit community, and there was rarely any threat to safety around there, but most of the people who lived by worked the whole day as they were young, healthy couples, so it was deserted at that time of day. My mother was greeted by a male and female who were dressed in midwifery outfits, with hospital badges and a very polite welcome, asking if they could come in. They explained that they had been sent by the hospital to check on her and the new baby. My mom let them in as they had all the professional clothes and badges and knew when my mother had given birth, etc. They even knew she had a little girl and my mother's name. Very convincing, but all that info is easy to access. The male said he was going to take me upstairs and check over me, and the female would check over my mother downstairs. However, my mother didn't feel okay about them wanting to separate us, and she explained that a pair of midwives had already been that week, and she said she was going to ring the hospital just to check, as nobody had notified her that some more were coming just a day or two after. She also said she warned them that her husband, my dad, was on his way home from work and wouldn't be happy about this. At this point, the pair got very defensive and said that they would leave after being really pushy with my mother to separate the two of us. Finally, she got the pair to leave, who quickly changed their behavior to being calmed down and said not to worry, it must have just been a mistake, and not to bother checking with the hospital when my mom was trying to contact the hospital. What was even weirder is that when my mom opened the door, making them leave, there was another person waiting in a car outside, probably the getaway driver, who had the engine still running. When they left, my mother, scared, rang the hospital, who said that they had not had any midwives scheduled to visit me and my mother, and that they always alert the mother if they are going to send midwives. They also said that they would never ask to separate the mother and baby. They asked for descriptions of the midwives and said that they didn't have a male midwife at the hospital where I was born, and to contact the police. Terrified, my mother called my dad, who came straight home and then reported it to the police, who took a description but never amounted to anything that we know of. Who knows what that pair were planning? It's so creepy that they'd gained access to all the information that my mother had recently given birth. They must have been watching the house to know my father wasn't home. They had even gone to the effort of having the uniform and badges made. Thank God my mother acted on her instinct and got them the hell out of the house and stuck to her guns. It's even more creepy to imagine what my life would be now if they had got to carry out what they were planning. I don't believe it could have been a genuine mix-up. They had not followed standard protocol in warning my mother that they were visiting. They were also very insistent on separating the two of us, and they were very rude and defensive when my mother challenged them, which is not acceptable behavior from a health professional. I believe that we were very lucky that they left without a fuss eventually. I hope I have never and will never meet that pair again, or any creepy impersonators with God knows what agenda behind them. And I hope they didn't go on to do this to any other new and vulnerable mothers.
Parents didn't believe me.
I just found this sub and I wanted to share my own experience. It happened when I was 13 and it's something I've never forgotten. We had just moved into a brand new house in a brand new housing development. A lot of the houses around us were either unfinished or had families that had just moved in. Behind our house was a lot of field, mostly for future houses. We lived in a fairly safe, small city, and the housing development was very quiet, so for the first few years we lived there, we never bothered to lock the doors. Even at night, most of the time it just wasn't something we thought about. My parents had just put in hardwood floor, so the house was a pretty echoey single story. One night, as I'm laying in bed trying to fall asleep, I thought I heard the back sliding glass door open. I was up late on the internet, but everyone else was asleep, so the house was quiet. I had my door slightly open so my cat could come and go, and so I knew that I was definitely hearing something. I froze, hoping it wasn't the door, but a moment later I heard it slide shut. Then I began to hear what sounded like heavy shoes walking across the hardwood floor. It was a very specific sound and I suddenly couldn't breathe. The footsteps were slow and quiet, like they were trying to make as little noise as possible. But because the floor was wood and our house had high ceilings, the steps echoed down the hallway to my room. Then I heard them stop. The sound of the hallway closet being opened, and then the door quietly clicking shut, like they'd turned the knob, pulled the door closed, and then released the knob once it was in place. It was silent after that. My heart was beating so fast, and I began crying. The only way to my parents' room was up the hallway. Their door was only about 20 feet away from where the hallway closet was. I was frozen, and I honestly thought I would pee my pants. I was so scared. However, it was silent for long enough that I knew I had to get my dad. So I stood up and walked sock-footed to my door. I stood there for a long time, breathing. Then I ran. It's not a long hallway, but I went as fast as I could. I got inside their room and tried to wake my dad up. "Dad, Dad," I was frantically whispering. Huh? He was half asleep. Dad. Huh? What? Dad, I think there's someone inside the house. What? Get up. I think there's someone inside the house. There's no one in here. Go back to sleep. Yes, there is. I start crying. That gets him up. My mom also wakes up at this point as well. So they both get out of bed. My dad's sure that there's no one in the house, doesn't even grab something as a weapon. But I follow behind him as soon as he leaves the room. He goes into the living room, passes the closet, turns on all the lights in the house. I remember standing in the living room, knowing exactly where the person was and not being able to say anything. He tells me, "Look, there's no one." He doesn't check the closet though, and I don't tell him to. I'm so afraid that whoever is in there will jump out with a knife and kill my dad in front of me, and 13-year-old me keeps thinking that I can't be the one responsible for my dad's death. So I say nothing, and I don't tell him to check the closet. I don't know why he didn't, because if I were a dad, I would have. He locks the front door and tells me to go back to bed. They wait until I'm back in my room before they close their own bedroom door and go back to sleep. Again, the house is silent and I'm laying there afraid because the person is still in here in the one place he didn't look. Suddenly, I hear the closet door open, just as slowly and as quietly as before. Then I hear the footsteps again. I could hear them so clearly walking towards the kitchen where the back door is, and they stop. That's followed by the sound of the back door being slid open and then quietly being pushed closed again. I hear the back door click into place, and then the house is silent. I'm laying there crying and breathing, but hearing them leave the house, I felt instant relief, though I was still shaking in fear. I'd give it a few minutes hoping that they wouldn't come back, and they don't. So after a bit, I sneak out there. My one and only thought is to lock the back door, which I managed to do, but the scariest part was that when I looked at the hall closet, the door wasn't closed anymore. It was cracked because they hadn't bothered to close it after they left, though I know it was definitely closed when my dad was out there with me. I tried bringing it up to them years later and they still didn't believe me, but that's not something you just hear.
This could be heaven.
I have been lurking around here for a while, reading these stories. It is about time that I share a creepy experience I had in my childhood. I'm not sure how it comes across via text, but hey, it is worthwhile sharing. I'm a 31-year-old male from Eindhoven, the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, we've got many houses that are attached to one another, especially on long streets. In the case of my parents' home, across the street were the exact same type of houses, divided by a 2-lane road. If you look outside the window, you look straight at the opposite house. It was my 11th birthday, around 11 o'clock in the evening. The last guest had left our house and it was time to go to bed. Just before I got up, the lights in the house across ours went on one by one, and I saw Angela, the woman living there, walking frantically around her house. She was somewhere in her 40s, your average, slightly clunky housewife. She lived there all by herself, though. All of her blinds were open, so I could see her every move. One big window for the living room and 2 smaller ones above that. I saw her walking back and forth, up and down for I guess about 20 minutes. Then all of a sudden, Queen's This Could Be Heaven started playing really loud, perpetually. When it finished, it played again and again. Then she came out, only wearing her panties, and stood in the middle of the road. My folks decided to check on her, and she did nothing but talk in gibberish. In her hand, she had a bag of tea lights. She lit them one by one and placed them on the road in a circle. She laid down on the floor in that circle. By chance, a friend of the family drove by with his shovel truck and stopped. She got up, put one of the tea lights in a shovel, and told him to run her over. "It is time for me to die," she said. He got out of the truck and pushed her in her house and closed the door. My parents were so shocked. They just stared outside and didn't realize that this was not for the eyes of a child. My mom closed the blinds. I went to bed, and pretty much immediately, I had horrible nightmares. I dreamt about frightening orange illuminating figures on our blinds, skeletons and whatnot. I don't really recollect so well anymore. I woke up, ran down and sought solace and comfort with my parents. I guess it was around midnight when my dad opened the blinds. There was Angela, pressed up against our window, eyes wide open, looking straight at me. She was mouthing words so fast and frantically that I could not decipher what she said by any means. Then an ambulance came out of nowhere and took her away. I guess our friend called the emergency number. I never saw her again, and please, for the sake of my heart, Angela, let's not meet again. To this day, I cannot listen to This Could Be Heaven.
Angry, alcohol-fueled ex-convict whose assault went a little too far.
My idiot mom dated a convict while she was a psychologist at the Kingston Pen. He was in for a very long sentence for aggravated assault, and my mother met him close to the end of his sentence. She eventually was fired after being caught, for the second or third time, having sex with him in a utility closet. But I digress. When he was being released, my mother asked me to pick him up from prison and drive him to the airport, and I, embarrassed to admit, stupidly agreed. So my boyfriend at the time and I go pick up Dick Knuckle, and not 45 minutes into our 3-hour trip after picking him up, he turns around and starts punching my boyfriend in the face, busting his nose and lip. I start yelling at him to stop, and he starts beating on me, punching me in my arms and legs. Mind you, I'm driving about 145 kilometers, 90 miles per hour, on the highway, with no exit in sight. I just want to add, this guy is a big fucking dude, 6 foot something and probably over 200 pounds of muscle, covered in tats, the whole shebang. Anyway, I pull off to the side of the highway, get out, throw his bag on the side of the road and scream at him until he gets out of my car before speeding home. I want to remind you this all happened on a Monday. Wednesday rolls around and I get a text from my brother telling me to call him ASAP. So I do, and he tells me mom is in the hospital in a coma, hooked up to machines, feeding tube, etc. She had broken both orbital sockets. Her jaw was broken. She was missing many teeth, shattered collarbone. She cracked her sternum and had multiple broken ribs. She needed reconstructive surgery on her face and metal plates put in. She has nerve damage now and can't smile on the right side of her face. She has trouble eating too because she can't tell whether or not she has food dripping down her face. And for the longest time, she could only drink through a straw. What had happened was, after I kicked dipshit out of my car, the cops found him wandering on the side of the freeway and took him to the airport. Tuesday night he arrived. He got hammered drunk and beat the shit out of my mother. He started at 11 p.m. and nobody stepped in until 3 a.m. First responders didn't show up until 4. I guess a couple people witnessed it going down, but didn't intervene until they saw Douche Canoe choke my mom out and start carrying her towards the tree line to finish the job in privacy. My mom now suffers from extreme PTSD. It controls every aspect of her life. She's a fucking mess, the equivalent of a human puddle, I'd say. So, convict that will not be named, let's not meet again. Also, I wanted to add, my mother dug her own grave. Don't pity her. That's absurd. There's a lot more to her crazy relationship with him that I left out because I didn't feel it was relevant to the story. Things like her smuggling drugs into prison for him, the police busting down the door and arresting him in the house for another crime. The blood my mom had to clean off the walls after was insane. Him drinking again and jumping out of my car to harass other drivers whilst waiting at a red light when I was taking him to the store. Things like that.
Man under my daughter's bed.
This happened about 6 months ago. I was 22 at the time. My daughter was only 4. I lived in a 2-story house with just me, my daughter, and my husband. I was taking at-home classes to be an iPhone specialist, starting at 5 p.m. and ending at 10 p.m., Monday through Friday. My husband had left for his 2 weeks of training he does every year for the military, so it's just me, my daughter, and our pit bull mix, Mavis. I had just finished my classes for the week and had the weekend free, so I decided to go to my mother's house until Sunday. So I packed up my stuff and my daughter's stuff, and we went for the weekend. We returned home Sunday to find someone had broken into our home. There are muddy footprints and the windows are open, but nothing was missing. I was going to call the police, but my sister's husband explained that the cops wouldn't do anything. Nothing happened that night, but the next day my mother came over to pick up my daughter so I could do my classes without worrying what she was into. They left, and I went to watch the class upstairs. I put headphones on so I could hear my instructor teach the class, but swear I keep hearing stuff downstairs. I even text my mom and told her I heard stuff downstairs and it was creeping me out, but she assured me it was probably just Mavis because everything was locked up tight and no one could get in. I agreed, thinking I was probably just freaking myself out. I continued listening to my instructor teach, and I swear I heard footsteps on the stairs, so I hurry up and take my headset off and listen. I didn't hear anything. I walked down the stairs and didn't see anything either, so I went back to class. At 10 p.m. my class was over, and my mom decided to just keep my daughter for the night. I was doing my homework with Mavis upstairs when all of a sudden she started barking and growling and ran downstairs. Now, Mavis usually barks and growls at the slightest noise outside, so I didn't think much of it, but I decided I should check it out anyway because of what happened while I was at my mother's. Again, nothing out of the ordinary, so I went back upstairs. I was finally done with homework and it's about midnight, so I went downstairs and called my mom like I always do. We were talking, and I decided to open my daughter's door and peek my head in. I don't know why I did this because my daughter was at my mom's for the night. Just a habit, I guess. I should have mentioned earlier that when you look in my daughter's room, her bed is on the far wall, a good ways away from the door, so you can clearly see under her bed. So I open the door, and to my horror, a man is under her bed. I just froze and didn't move, just stood there in shock. After what felt like minutes, I slowly shut the door and whisper into the phone to my mom that there's a man in my house, under my daughter's bed. My mom was terrified, and she screamed at me to get outside and to stay on the phone with her, and she had my brother call the police. So I ran outside with Mavis and waited for the police to arrive. About 3 minutes later, they came and searched my house and found no one. But they discovered my bathroom window was open, and they happened to shine their light at the living room window, and I could clearly see 2 huge handprints where they slid the window down. The cops waited for my mom and brother to get there, and while we were waiting, they told me about this man that usually stays 2 houses down from mine with his parents. Both of his parents have a pretty bad drug habit, and this guy has been known to put women in the hospital and trying to kill them. What scares me even more is since we have bought this house, my daughter has been terrified and always told my mom that she wanted to stay with her because it wasn't safe at mommy's house. I didn't think too much of it because I thought maybe it was just a new place, and you know how kids are with new places. After this whole thing happened, I stayed with my mom until my husband came home. We decided to ask our daughter about the house, and what she told me absolutely terrified me. She said that at night, while her dad and I sleep, monsters come to her window and try to get in. She says it's a boy monster and a girl. The next day, we installed alarms on all the windows and security lights. I can't stop questioning why. Why was this man under my daughter's bed? Was he waiting for me to go to sleep? Was he waiting for my mom to bring my daughter back home and for me to put her to bed? I get sick to my stomach thinking of what could have happened.
Why doesn't her dad look at me?
In high school, I had to write a paper which summarized my life story, starting from birth. I reflected on my earliest memories, and when I remembered this, I had to sit down. My heart pounded as I realized what had actually happened and what my 4-year-old self couldn't understand. When I was a kid, my family often vacationed with their friends' families, and we'd all live together in a giant beach house or a cabin for a week. This must have been one of the first of those vacations. I wanted to hang out with the rest of the kids, but since they were all at least 1 year older than me, they thought I was uncool. I followed my sister around the house, but since she didn't want to play with me, I mostly just eavesdropped on everybody's conversations. One day, all the kids happened to be in one room. No adults, plenty of toys, hella fun. Off to the side was this tiny door, the tiniest I'd ever seen, which led to a dark, empty room. I remember we were absolutely fascinated by that tiny door, and the older kids would make up stories about it. Jennifer was the eldest, and in my memories she's a teenager, but that might be skewed since I thought everyone in the double digits was super mature. She even knew how to use her mom's cell phone. All the kids were playing, having fun, enjoying their childhood. Then Jennifer got a call. She had to ask us to be quiet several times, and she sounded really serious. I thought this request was silly and a little annoying since I wanted to play. The call ended, and Jennifer told us, "My dad is coming back here soon." Jennifer's dad had driven away for a few hours, but now he was driving back. Someone asked questions about where he went and what he was doing. I think she said something about drinking. At some point, Jennifer addressed all of us and said something like, "My dad looks at kids and takes them on drives. You all have to be really careful when he comes back." I couldn't grasp anything else she said. Then she talked to a girl and a boy. "I noticed he was looking at you two a lot, so you both have to be really, really careful. I think he wants to take you each on a drive, but don't go with him if he asks." Their conversation went on for a while, and I felt jealous that they talked so much with Jennifer and that her dad was looking at them instead of me. Why wasn't I special? I grew bored of listening to them and went back to playing. A car pulled up and Jennifer told us to go into the tiny door room. We brought some toys along. I was psyched to go into the tiny door, but it ended up being a dark, empty room without any fairies or hobbits. After a while, we left. As far as I know, nothing bad happened on that trip. I grew up with the two kids Jennifer talked to, and they seem pretty well adjusted. But Jennifer and her family never vacationed with us again. I told my family this story, and they thought it was an imaginary memory that my 4-year-old brain had concocted. My parents are positive that there weren't any weird, creepy, or alcoholic dads there, just good friends. My sister didn't remember any of it. I can't rationalize how or why I would have imagined it. My childhood was great, and I had zero concept of pedophiles and alcoholism until I was like 11. Luckily, this experience did not ruin tiny doors for me in the slightest. Love me some tiny doors.
Rainforest Man.
Background story. I am a Brazilian military brat, so I've lived in quite a few places. In 2007, when I was 11, we had to move to a small city in the middle of the Amazon, close to the Colombian border. The city was very isolated, and we lived in an even more isolated military village. There were 3 villages: the private's village, the sergeant's village, and the officer's village. These villages were linked through trails that cut through the heavy woods. One of these trails was crossed by a water stream. The internet was very slow. I remember my downloads having the crazy velocity of 3 kilobytes per second. We had no cell phone service, and the TV only received signals from 2 channels. We had almost nothing to do, so the kids were very united. We spent the day riding our bicycles, going through the trails, spending the day in someone's house. It was great. On one of those trails, one day, a man started showing up. He had the features of a native person and always seemed to be taking care of the nature, collecting trash that someone left behind, calling for birds, looking at the trees. We talked to him sometimes, and we named him the Rainforest Man because he knew a lot about the trees and the animals. I remember asking him one day why he was there, and he said that the command of the base hired him to help them explore the area because he knew the area very well. It seemed logical to me, so I brushed it off. One particular day, 2 girlfriends of mine and I were at this other girl's house. Her house was in a different village than ours, and while we were there, a boy showed up. This boy was a couple years older than us, and my friends were very interested in him. It was starting to get dark, and I told them that we should go home, but they wanted to stay and talk to this boy, and I was too scared to go back alone, so I waited for them. When we decided to go home, it was really dark. The trails weren't illuminated, and we could see very little. So in the middle of the dark, we see a light on our path, more precisely through the water stream. We got scared and decided to hide and see who it was. After a while, we could see that the person holding the flashlight was the native guy. He was furiously looking for something, waving his flashlight around. He probably heard us. The thing is, he was holding a very large knife called a pichera. It's commonly used there to cut big fish. We stayed quiet for a while, but as it was getting even darker, we decided to reveal ourselves. We got onto our bikes and we went straight to the water stream, where he was, that we needed to cross. But before we arrived there, he found us. He was right in front of us, with his knife pointed at us. We couldn't cross the water stream riding our bikes, so we dropped them there and ran for our lives. After we passed him, he turned off his flashlight. It was absolutely dark. We could see close to nothing, but we just ran straight ahead. When I got to the other side of the stream, I fell down and hurt my knees. He probably thought I was still running with the other girls, so I decided to stay where I was instead of getting up, making too much noise and revealing my location. He then turned on the flashlight again, and I could see he was stealing one of our bikes. He brought it to the water stream and carried the bike on his back, following the water path into the woods. I remember he walked really close to me, and it was one of the scariest moments of my life. After he was considerably far, I got up and ran straight ahead again. When I finally got to the village, our parents were already running to me, since the other girls had already told them what happened. I never saw the rainforest man again. Turns out they never hired anyone, as the guy had told me. After this, soldiers started to supervise the trails, and no one ever showed up again, at least while I lived there. So, rainforest man, I know we probably won't meet again, but just to be sure, let's not meet.